Welcome to the Happiness Minute. Our episode today is called Balancing Act: The Impact of Bipolar Disorder on Relationships and Daily Life. Living with bipolar disorder presents unique challenges that can significantly affect personal and professional relationships, as well as daily responsibilities. We will look into how it influences interactions with family, friends, and colleagues, and explore the difficulties faced in managing work, school, and personal commitments. And our guest today is Catherine. She is an international coach and speaker with 50 years of lived experience of bipolar disorder. She coaches and supports individuals and helps to educate their families, friends, and supporters. Catherine speaks regularly at mental health first aid courses, giving participants a first hand experience of someone with a bipolar diagnosis. Hi everyone, I'm Anna, and we're back in the Happiness Minute. We've got a very special guest today, and her name is Catherine. Hi, Catherine. How are you?
Hi, Anna.
So, Catherine, before anything else, can you tell us more about yourself and what you do?
Yes, I actually coach people with bipolar disorder. I also support their relatives, their friends, people who are their support network. I offer free 30-minute calls just to talk to them, see if they want to be coached, because very often with bipolar, there's a resistance. Quite a lot of people have this affinity really with having the hypo mania because it's
Yeah.
actually very pleasant, even though the depression is very bad. So I have a little screening call for 30 minutes to talk to people. And during that time, I always teach them a couple of techniques that can
Ah,
help them for when they're depressed.
I see.
So yeah, so in a nutshell, that's what I do.
Okay, yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. So, first of all, because I'm not really that familiar with it, can you tell me more what a bipolar disorder is?
Yes. So bipolar disorder isn't part of the neurodiversity spectrum. It's a separate mental illness.
Ah, I
And
see. Okay.
it's what's called an affective disorder, which means it's a mood disorder. Now,
Mm-hmm.
we all get high moods and low moods, but with bipolar, that takes on an extra dimension. And it's quite interesting. It's as if the mood kind of takes you. So when you first start going either up or down, you tend not to notice. But then as you get worse, either way you do. And very often you need people in your support network to help you, to say to you, oh, Catherine, you're starting to speak a bit fast, you're sounding a little bit different. And then with their help and sometimes with medication or someone else helping you use different modalities, you can actually stop the mood swing getting any worse. So it's important to have support around you. That's really my message to people. If you can get people who understand, and I spend quite a lot of time educating people about what bipolar is, how to look out for it, and how to help people. And with bipolar, there are three main types.
Okay.
First type is bipolar 1, and that is where people actually have mania, which is a
Ah,
psychosis. And with mania, when they're in that state, it's a very high energy state, but they're not aware of it themselves.
mhm.
So that's bipolar 1. So they have mania, and sometimes mostly they have depression as well, but they don't have to have depression. It's not required for that diagnosis, but most of them will. Then the second form is bipolar 2. This is what I have. Um, and basically, that's where you have hypermania. So, hypermania is a state where you have huge energy levels, you're very excited about everything. Everything, it's like the whole world's in slow motion and you're in quick motion. You're thinking quickly, you have all these ideas, you think you can conquer the world. It's a really very nice state to be in. So, you can understand why people actually quite enjoy that. But it can result in you spending a lot of money or making decisions that you wouldn't normally make
I see.
when you're feeling kind of in the middle. And then as the corollary of that, you have depressions. And usually the depressions last a lot longer than the hypomania. So that's bipolar 2. And then there's unspecified bipolar disorder, where you alternate more quickly in between the two states.
I see.
And that's why it's called unspecified. And then there is a kind of a subclinical level called cyclothymia, where people have highs and lows of moods, but it's not enough to warrant medication. And very often you might have someone in your family, if you have bipolar, who had that. For instance,
I
my
see.
father had cyclothymia. So he used to have big mood changes, but not as bad as, you know, being medicated for it.
So you mentioned something about diagnosis. So how do you get diagnosed with a bipolar disorder? Is it like a formal type where you go to doctors and
You have to have, in this country, in the UK, you have to have a
okay.
psychiatrist to diagnose you. And that's why in the UK at the moment, the average time, and I mean average, is 9.5 years to get
Wow,
diagnosed.
that's a long time.
It's a long time, and you can do a lot of damage. We'll talk later about the damage you can
Yeah.
do to relationships or all this kind of thing. But really, you need to get to a GP first, which can be quite challenging itself. And they need to understand exactly what's going on with your mood swings. Because normally, if you may go to the GP when you're depressed, and the GP
Mhm.
will see someone who's clearly not happy, and they normally tend to give out antidepressants because they don't think to say, you know, have you had mood swings or is this just a depression? And that can be quite damaging because sometimes a person who has bipolar disorder, when they're given antidepressants, that can flip them into a hypomanic or manic episode. Not always, but sometimes. And it's kind of diagnostic. If that happens to you, that means you've most likely got bipolar. But mostly what happens is you have the tablets and you don't actually get better because antidepressants on their own don't really work for bipolar disorder. But because your mood is swinging anyway, you go away, you may take the tablets or you may not, but eventually you just get better of your own accord.
I see.
And then you may have another high or low, whatever, and then you come back to the GP maybe a year later, maybe later than that, and they look in the notes and think, oh, this person had antidepressants and then they got better. Because when you're depressed in bipolar depression, it's quite dark and you
Yeah.
don't think about having high moods. All you can think about is that you're in a lot of mental pain. It's physical and mental pain going on. So you don't think to say to them, actually, I've been having high moods as well as this. You just want relief from that terrible pain that you're in.
Mhm.
So it becomes a kind of rinse and repeat.
I see.
And as I say, quite a few people like having certainly the hypomania because it's a kind of a compensation for those times when they're down. And
Also with
you can write, you know, you can write poetry, you can do a lot of work when you're
that's
hypomanic
what I was
actually.
thinking as well. Like you mentioned, the hypomania actually you tend to be more creative when you're in
Yes,
that state, right? So
absolutely.
so a lot of the probably I don't know, maybe I'm wrong in this or maybe there's some stats. Maybe a lot of the creative people has this bipolar disorder because sometimes you'll see them really like very productive and then suddenly it something just goes wrong completely.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of like a
That's
hypo.
right. So they have that, and then they suddenly get depressed, and they kind of drop out of the public view or whatever, because
Yeah,
they then can't sustain that creativity. Some people also can write poetry when they're depressed, but it's more likely to be in the hypomanic phase when they're having all these amazing ideas that they wouldn't normally come to, and it's like the whole world is in slow motion. They are just going round, and it's lovely when you're outside because everything looks so bright. All the colours look brighter and being outside in nature is lovely amongst flowers and beautiful greens everywhere. And you think what a wonderful world it is. So
yeah,
it is a complete opposite from the depression to that hypomania. With mania, it's maybe more likely that people will be arrested for doing something that they shouldn't be doing because they're
mhm,
not really
yeah.
aware, and then they can get help with diagnostics because they would be arrested and then they'd be given
I see.
someone would notice and then they'd be given a psychiatric assessment. So sometimes with bipolar 1 it's easier for people to get help because of
Because
that
they'll
aspect.
see it immediately, right? Like
Yes,
professionals will
the
be able to like, oh
professionals will
yeah,
see.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess like now I'm actually quite interested in terms of how it affects relationships. So, for example, if we look at the first people that would be affected definitely are family members. So how does bipolar disorder affect your like the relationship with your family?
Well, it's very difficult to have a consistency in the relationship when you maybe come home, you don't know how your husband or wife is going to be, or your mother or father.
Mhm.
I was recently speaking to a man whose mother had bipolar, and he said, every time he got home from school, he didn't know what was going to be happening with his mother. Many people who have bipolar actually take to drugs, substance abuse, to get the high that they would normally get from their illness. And so it's quite common for people to maybe be dependent on alcohol or something, and that of course has a huge effect on families. And when you don't know how your person's going to be, and sometimes they can be quite aggressive.
I see. Yeah.
So what happens is you tend to push your family away from you, and when you're very depressed and you can't get out of bed and you can't work or do anything that you normally supposed to be doing or that you normally enjoy doing, then that again creates difficulties for the family because the income's gone. You may lose your job, and you lose a lot of friends because when you're depressed, you physically and mentally don't have the energy to reach out to people. You're just very inwardly focused. So, a lot of people kind of give up trying to contact you because you don't answer your phone, you don't, you're not on social media or any of the messaging apps because you just cannot do anything else other than cope with the mental state and pain that you're in.
Yeah, so that's how it impacts your family members, and also you just mentioned touched upon it very briefly. That's how it impacts your friendships and social interactions
Yeah.
as well, right?
Yes. And in fact, when you're high, you're going out and you're meeting lots of new people.
Mhm.
So the
Yes,
opposite to the depression is where you're out all the time, you don't need any sleep, so you're just making social contacts everyone, and then you kind of there's usually a crash after the
yeah,
high, so then you drop out, and then it goes the other way. So it is a thing of extremes. It's
mhm.
people are either one thing or the other, and then there is a period in between when they have a sort of normality, and that's where I come in to help people. It's much easier for me to help people when they're not too high or not too low. So when they're in a state where they can really take in what I'm suggesting for, lifestyle changes and routines and things that will make it easier for them to live with this condition as on top of the medications that they're taking, because most people do need to be medicated with this.
Mhm.
And bipolar does get worse, and there is some evidence to show that as you go on, the episodes, if they aren't controlled, can actually damage your brain,
I
so
see.
that later on you can have damaged cognition because of these episodes. So it is important, to get some kind of treatment.
I see. So I would say like as well because of the relationship, it can be a bit of a strain as well. So how would you cope in like work environment because or like school environment because this is something different. How do they cope then?
It's very difficult. I mean, my mood swings started when I was 12. So, and I wasn't treated until I was 25. So I
Oh, it's
had
a
a
long time.
periods at school of being, I was either kind of high or low. I didn't really have a medium in between. So I was either very depressed and found it hard to learn when you just so tired because
Mhm.
with bipolar with myself, I found it difficult to sleep either when I was hypomanic or when I was depressed. Some people sleep all the time, but I couldn't sleep either way. So I used to become very, very tired and quite irritable. And that obviously affects people around you. It affects the way you learn. And then when, I was kind of high, I was like doing a lot of things and learning stuff. And then, if I had exams when I was in a part when I was high, it was much easier. Whereas if I was depressed, I couldn't actually write properly. So for school, it's quite devastating. But most people are start with bipolar round about 17, 18, 19,
I see. So
20.
it's not really like childhood normally. It'd be like
It's
in their
not
late
normally, it
teens.
can be, Anna, but it's not normally. Some people have it in childhood, but very often there's a stressful event that's kind of tips people over into a mood swing, or a lot of lack of sleep or something. Sleep is very important for people with bipolar, because we don't have our circadian rhythms, those rhythms that tell us whether it's night or day. Those are quite fragile in people with bipolar disorder. So any sort of time change, or even, I mean, I used to fly. I used to fly to the west coast of America, and it used to be very difficult for me to do my job when I was there, because it took a lot out of me, that time change and actually changing my sleep patterns. So that's hard, and shift working is very hard for people with bipolar. So
Shift
there are a lot of
working.
things that a work environment could do. They could, you know, maybe if you were working and you needed to contact people, you could do it by video link rather than having to actually fly over lots of time zones. Or if you were, you know, a lot of the time I was supposed to entertain clients and things in the evening, which is hard when you need to go to bed at a reasonable time, in order to keep your sleep patterns. Because I always advise people to have the same waking time and not to have lie-ins, so that that kind of anchors those circadian rhythms, where ours are fragile. So, and it can be, you know, even with the hour change, it can be hard for people with
Oh,
bipolar
I see.
disorder.
Yeah, the daylight savings time and
Exactly. Yes,
mm.
exactly.
So I would say, like, in terms of, like you just mentioned just now, like the daily routines can be quite difficult.
Yes.
So it does really affect that. So can you give some examples of like the daily routines that's mostly affected by the bipolar disorder condition?
Yeah, so sleep is the biggest one. Also eating and exercise, because those things are the things that tell our bodies what times we should be doing things. Diet is quite important, and certainly with the depressive side, a
Mhm.
Mediterranean diet has been shown to help
I see.
depression. Actually, it's scientifically shown. Um, and also, when you're depressed, sometimes you just crave the carbs all the time, which doesn't really help you. You know, you need to have a variety, and actually eating a plant-based diet is quite helpful.
Plant-based.
But
Plant-based. Yeah.
again, when I have my clients, I don't say you must eat a plant-based diet. I say, maybe can you eat more legumes? Can you, you know,
Mhm.
so small changes for people, because it's hard to make changes. We all
Yeah.
know this.
Yeah.
And people will make the changes that they want to make. So it's kind of like making it interesting for people, getting people to move more. That's one of the most important things in the daytime, for people to be moving. Outside time, if you can get out into a wood or the country, that is incredibly good, because the trees all give off these phytogens, which
Mhm.
actually can lift people's mood. And it's, you know, about being part, remembering we are part of nature at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And I think so many of us live in, you know, places where we don't actually experience much of the countryside.
Mhm. Yeah, you mentioned lifestyle changes. So you said like diet, like, nice to have it, like to have like a plant-based diet. I said exercise as well. So what sort of exercises are quite good?
To be honest, things like yoga are very good, because that exercises your mind and your body,
Mhm.
and you do a lot of breathing in it. Breath work is very
Breath
helpful,
work. Okay.
because breathing can actually comfort your body and bring it down into a rest and relaxation state.
Hmm.
One of the cranial nerves, the vagus nerve, which is a paired nerve, has been shown, if we stimulate the vagus nerve, we can actually bring the body back to a state of rest and relaxation. Because with bipolar, very often you're in a state of kind of
Yeah.
fight or fright, nervous,
Yeah.
whatever. So some breathing, stimulating various points for the vagus nerve, and doing certain other exercises will really help. And help to also to calm their energy. I mean, I do a lot of work with energy with people, to show them how to bring up emotions that they may otherwise have suppressed. Because as humans, we're really bad at dealing with our own emotions.
Mm.
And it's because we've got this mind which is
Yeah.
thinking, oh, that woman wasn't nice to me. And you have these ruminating thoughts.
Yeah.
Whereas if I watch my dogs, you know, if I'm kind of angry or something, and I stroke them, they go away and they shake. They just get that
And
emotionation out, and you know, energy is meant to move, and it kind of gets stuck in us. And I think sometimes, you know, it's we don't know how, because we've kind of forgotten, with all this braininess and everything,
mhm.
we've forgotten how just natural it is for energy to flow in and flow out without getting kind of lost anywhere.
Cool. You also mentioned about sleep habits because, like, definitely traveling to different time zone can be difficult. But like here in the UK, of course, we change time like twice a year. So how would they handle that? Like a bit of a
So
tip then.
yeah, so what I suggest is about 2 weeks before that time change, you change your getting up time, but you change it by
Ah,
about a quarter of an hour for
quarter
sort
of
of
an
3 or 4 days, and then another quarter of an hour. And because a quarter of an hour is it's a small amount, but it really helps, and it's easier for someone with bipolar to actually make that change. And it's not when we do it incrementally, we get up to that hour. So whichever ways the hour is going, I suggest people beforehand, because at the other end of the scale in October, again, we have
Yeah, it's
extra time.
yeah, extra
But
time.
even that is disruptive as well to
Yeah.
people. So yeah,
I
so
think
that's what
it's
I
the
would say
winter
to them.
time is harder, I would say.
The winter time is hard on us because it's those awfully short days and the
Yeah.
darkness, which can again mess up with your sleeping. And you're trying to do things when it's not natural light. Again, before we had electric lights and everything, people would go to bed. It's like when you watch chickens. Chickens will go to bed so much
Yeah,
earlier in the
same time.
winter, and then in summer again. So we've kind of come a long way from this. So we're not really doing what our bodies are in tune with, if you like. Um,
And this is where the circadian rhythm comes in because every
yeah,
one of us would have it. Like, um,
yeah. We all have circadian rhythms. Even bacteria have circadian rhythms because they need to know when to do things. It's just a kind of a time. You have to think of it as a time clock, which tells your body at what time. Because sleep is so important. I mean, sleep is important on so many levels,
yeah,
and one of the most important things is the housekeeping. Whilst you're asleep, things, the mitochondria will sort out the cells, things that are broken or whatever will be engulfed
yeah.
and taken away. So all of that is done. And we do need that sleep time to do that. I mean, it has been shown that actually lack of sleep can lead to Alzheimer's because the
Oh,
brain isn't getting the time and the space it needs to do its own housekeeping. That's called autophagy. And it is really very important that we have enough time and again, time on screens and things. I always say to people, you need a blue light filter if you're looking at
yeah.
screens in the evening. You can get sunglasses, things to do that. But also it really helps to be off devices for at least an
Mm-hmm.
hour before bed, because at 9 o'clock your melatonin starts kicking in, which is the sleep hormone. And blue light really affects that. So if you can be off gadgets, and again, television isn't good either. So it's quite important for people who have bipolar to really be able to get those routines fixed in so that they can be kind to themselves, so that they can allow the body to just do naturally what it's going to do. Because the changes, those changes seem small, but for someone with bipolar, they can make a really big difference to your life. I mean, they can help other people as well.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
other people maybe have more strong circadian rhythms, so it's easier. It doesn't make so much impact on them.
Mm. Okay, so in terms of like strategies individuals with bipolar disorder can use, especially to manage their symptoms at in a workplace, because I think a lot, like you mentioned about like the age that you get diagnosed normally, it would be like in your late teens. So you're basically going into, like working already. So how can they manage it? If you can give me a couple of strategies that they
Hmm.
might be able to use.
Yes, I think it's quite difficult. I mean, there is an awful lot of stigma about bipolar.
Mhm.
And people are working, they're normally relatively stable. And I wouldn't advise anyone to tell their employer when they're at an interview that they have bipolar. What I would advise them to do is to, you know, just interview as normal. And then when they get that job and they find out what everything that needs to be done, and they are, they've passed their probation period or whatever, if they have a sympathetic employer or an HR person, they should then go to them and say, look, this is my diagnosis. And the HR, the companies have to make certain accommodations for people with things like bipolar. And as I said, one of those would be not expecting them to entertain until all hours of the night, and giving them some space. Because sometimes people with bipolar are very highly sensitive, and some lights are difficult for them. It can be
too much,
difficult
yeah.
for them to work in a very busy atmosphere. So in a cubicle with all cubicles around can be hard. So it may be that they want to be slightly away from other people so that they've got a bit of space around them. And also someone so that, you know, if they do feel unwell or whatever, so that they can talk to someone. There is someone in the office who they can just go and have a chat to. I think that's quite important, that they feel that there is someone who is sympathetic to them, because they may not want to talk to other employees. You know, as I say, there is a stigma, sadly, but you know, that's what we live with at the moment. But I'm hoping that, you know, speaking on podcasts like yourselves, you know, that this will be more widely known, because a lot of people with bipolar are actually, as you say, very creative. They make
Yeah.
good leaders because they have a lot of charisma when they're, you know,
Yes,
doing
they are.
well.
Yeah.
And you know, it would be lovely if they could feel supported in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned something about counseling as well and
Mm.
therapy. Does it really help, in terms of managing a bipolar disorder?
I haven't found counselling helpful. I had a year of a psychologist because I was in a very depressed state when I came off lithium, the first drug that I was on. And my mother had just died, and I had breast cancer, all in the same sort of
Ah, yeah,
6 month
very traumatic.
period.
Yes.
So it was very dramatic. And I was actually talking to a psychiatrist at the time, and he gave me a whole year of this amazing psychology lady. But we didn't work like, it wasn't like counselling. I researched, because I was into clinical research, that was what I was working on at the time when I was ill. And I researched different modalities,
Mhm.
you know, with meditation, mindfulness, the emotional freedom technique, the tapping, this
Yeah.
all these sort of things, sound therapy and everything. And the psychologist encouraged me to do these things, to see what things that I could find that would help me. And some things helped me and some things didn't. And I kind of developed a toolbox of those things that then, when I'd had a year with her, um, I decided to use to help other people. Because my coaching isn't, we don't speak all the time about the past. We talk about what we can do to make small changes in our lives in order to make things better. I think with counseling and therapy, it tends to be going over the same thing, which actually with bipolar doesn't help so much, because your mind is already doing that ruminating, and the challenge is to move it on. And very often you can do that using a gratitude practice, where you ask someone to write down 3 things just before they go to sleep, 3 things in the morning, and just feel that gratitude. Because even when you're depressed, you can feel gratitude. You may not be able to feel love, but you can be thankful for the bed that you're lying in. Just things like that, and that will help those thoughts. With counseling and therapy, you know, people just talk about things a lot, and sometimes that can imprint them even more on the brain, when what you're wanting to do is let these things go. So you're wanting to, you know, move trauma on and things. And actually the EFT is very good for trauma. And I'm currently doing a certification with rapid transformational
Oh
therapy,
dear.
which I can use not on people with bipolar 1, because you can't use that hypnosis for people with psychosis, but for bipolar 2, where they have hypomania. That would be very helpful for getting to the root about what's going on with depressive thoughts and things. So, I mean, my philosophy is to educate people so that they can help themselves to move forward, to have a better life, and actually to, you know, to do what they came here to do, to the world to do. So,
Yeah. Okay, so I've got the two last questions for you. The first of the first one is basically, definitely support is very important when
mhm.
you have this. So how can family members and friends support a loved one with a bipolar disorder?
So basically it's about kind of what I call lovingly watching people.
Ah, okay.
So not making it feel as if every time that person laughs, people are going to say, "Oh my goodness, you know." It's kind of really spending time with that person and understanding what happens when they start going either one way, up or down or whatever. And then just being able to just, tap them on the shoulder and say, okay, like my husband would do, that's a bit much, it sounds like you're getting a little bit high, you okay, whatever, and then they can just help you without the person feeling that they can't say anything, but people are going to come round and get in a state. So it needs calmness, I think, and just trusting that they'll see if there's some difference, and then they can actually be there to help that person when they need them, and also to celebrate them when they do things well. So it's really having a loving relationship, I think, is the kindest thing that you can do for someone with bipolar.
Okay. Okay. So my last question is, how do they, how would people contact you and connect with you so that if they have any issues, they can connect with you quickly?
Yes, so so my website is www.movebeyondbipolar.com, and people can contact me through that. Also, my email is catherine@movebeyondbipolar.com, so people can email me. And LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. Look for Catherine Stratta. There's only one me on LinkedIn, so
Ah,
that's
that's
easy
good.
to find. I also have a Facebook group called Move Beyond Bipolar, so people can find me there. I'm on TikTok and also in Instagram. So some of the younger people, have contacted me and said, "Oh, I saw your videos. So I do some small videos for TikTok, very often answering questions because
I
people
see.
ask me so many questions. So I just do little videos answering the questions that they ask. So
That's good.
yes, so I am around. So it's Move
Okay.
Beyond Bipolar, basically.
Okay. Okay. So thank you so much for today. I've learned quite a bit.
Well, thank you for having me, Anna. I really appreciate it.
So everyone, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode. So we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time. And see you. Bye.